Galactic Council shocked when Earth strikes back. The sky above the Pacific Fleet base turned gray as massive shadows fell across the land. Commander David stood at the edge of the observation tower, watching the ships come down through the clouds. 5 ships, each one big enough to block out the sun. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time. The hulls shined like polished silver, and they moved through the air without a single sound. David had studied pictures of these ships for years. Now he saw them in person, and his stomach felt heavy. The communication systems crackled to life. A voice came through the speakers, smooth and cold. It was Ambassador Lyra of the delegation. She spoke as if talking to children. "We are the Galactic Council. Your world, called Earth by your species, is now under Council authority. You have 3 hours to surrender all military weapons and accept our terms. We will take your rare minerals, your water, and a portion of your people to work in our factories. This is mercy. This is kindness. Surrender now, and we will not destroy your cities." David did not move. He had expected this message. He had prepared for it. The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. They controlled over 400 worlds. Their technology was so advanced that Earth scientists could barely understand it. To them, humans were nothing, just another primitive species that needed to be managed. But David knew something the Council did not know. He knew that for the past 15 years, Earth had not been sleeping. While the Council ignored humanity, humanity had been watching. They had studied every Council broadcast. They had learned their patterns. They had analyzed their military tactics. And they had built something in secret that the Council thought was impossible. David turned from the window and walked to the communications center. Captain Rachel was already there, her eyes locked on the tactical displays. Around them, dozens of officers watched data stream across screens. This was the moment they had trained for. "Send the message," David said quietly. Rachel did not hesitate. She pressed the communication button. "Galactic Council, this is Earth Defense Command. We reject your terms. We will not surrender. You are not welcome on our world." For a long moment there was silence. David could hear the sound of his own heart beating. Then Ambassador Lyra's voice came back, and now it held anger. "You have made a grave mistake, primitive species. You have chosen destruction. Your arrogance will cost you everything." The sky lit up. The Council ships began firing. Their weapons looked like lines of pure light cutting through the atmosphere toward Earth. David had seen simulations of this attack 10,000 times. He knew exactly what would happen. "Activate the grid," he said. Rachel moved her hands across the console. Across the entire planet, from Australia to Canada, from Japan to Brazil, hidden defense systems came to life. These were not weapons the Council had seen before. They were not advanced in the way Council technology was advanced. But they were built to do one specific thing: hurt Council ships. The first laser burst from the Council ships hit the upper atmosphere. The energy was enormous. It could have destroyed a small city. But David's team had built the defense grid to absorb that energy and turn it into something else. Electromagnetic pulses spread across the sky, moving in perfect waves. The first Council ship shuddered. Its shields, which were designed to protect against conventional weapons, began to fail. The ship's captain did not understand what was happening. This world was supposed to be primitive. It was supposed to have no real weapons, but something was tearing at his ship from the inside. The ship's computer systems started to fail. Navigation became impossible. Weapons would not fire. And then the directed energy weapons from Earth came up. They were simple compared to Council technology, but they worked. They burned through the damaged shields and tore into the ship's hull. The first Council ship exploded. The blast was visible from space. And for the first time in 3,000 years, a Galactic Council military vessel had been destroyed by a species that the Council thought was primitive. In the operations center below the Australian desert, Doctor watched the data streaming in. The first Council ship was gone. 3 more were taking damage. The defense grid was working perfectly. He had helped design the weapons systems that were now destroying the Council's ships. It felt unreal. But there was no time to think about feelings. The Council ships were changing their tactics. They began moving in coordinated patterns that the simulations had not predicted. 2 of them escaped the initial assault and started climbing back towards space. Admiral Foster, who was coordinating the naval defense, made a decision. "Launch the anti-orbital fighters," she commanded. Above the Pacific Ocean, human fighter jets screamed into the sky. The pilots inside had trained for this moment their entire lives. They knew they were flying toward ships that had weapons they could barely understand. But they also knew that they had one advantage. They had studied Council military tactics for years. They knew how Council commanders thought, and they knew exactly how to kill them. The battle in the skies above Earth lasted only 40 minutes. When it ended, the Council had lost 5 ships. Thousands of Council soldiers were dead, and the Galactic Council, for the first time in its long history, had been defeated by a world that the entire galaxy had considered powerless. On the surface, in cities and towns across every continent, humans began to understand what had just happened. The impossible had occurred. Earth had fought back, and Earth had won. But David knew that this victory was only the beginning. The Galactic Council would not accept this defeat. They would return with a much larger force, and next time they would not make the same mistakes. The real war was about to start. Earth would need to prepare for something far more terrible than what they had just faced. The question was whether humanity had the strength to survive what was coming. David looked at the tactical display. New Council ships were already being mobilized. The war for Earth's freedom had only just begun. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light. A primitive world had destroyed Council ships. The news was impossible, yet it was true. In Council chambers and military stations and trading posts on 1,000 different worlds, beings heard the message and did not believe it. Then they watched the recorded battle footage, and they had to believe. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. 12 Council leaders sat in a vast chamber, each one representing a powerful species that controlled dozens of worlds. They were shocked. They were confused. Most of all, they were angry. "This is not possible," said Commander Vex, who led the Council's military forces. "Earth is a primitive backwater. Its people have barely developed space travel. They should not be able to fight our ships." But the evidence was clear. 5 Council ships had been destroyed. Their weapons systems had failed. Their shields had been broken, and the Earth military had done it with weapons that should not exist. "We underestimated them," said Ambassador Lyra, though her voice was now filled with hatred rather than boredom. "We sent too few ships. We did not think it was necessary to prepare for resistance. We will not make that mistake again." The Council voted to send a much larger force. Not just 5 ships this time, but 50 ships. Not just a basic assault team, but a full military expedition with generals and advanced weapons. They would crush Earth. They would make an example of this primitive world. No other species would ever dare to resist Council authority. On Earth, David stood in the underground command center and watched the Council's preparations. His team had computers that could access Council communications. They could see everything the Council was doing. The sight made his blood run cold. 50 ships, Rachel said, her voice barely a whisper. "They are sending 50 ships." David nodded. He had expected this. "We cannot win a direct fight with 50 Council ships. Our weapons were designed to surprise them once. They will not be surprised again." Doctor was already working on solutions. His team of scientists had spent months developing new weapon systems. They had time, but not much. The Council fleet would arrive in 3 weeks. They needed to be ready. "We have to think differently," said. "We cannot match them in firepower, so we have to match them in intelligence." David made a decision that would change everything. He would reach out to species within the Council that were tired of Council rule. He would find allies. Earth could not win alone, but Earth might be able to win with help. Ambassador James Turner was tasked with the impossible job of contacting alien species and asking them to betray the Galactic Council. His communications went out in secret, hidden inside Council communications where Council sensors would never find them. He sent messages to the Collective, who had been forced to give up control of their home world. He sent messages to the Free Worlds Coalition, which had been trying to break away for decades. He sent messages to the Accord, whose territory had been shrinking under Council pressure. The responses came back slowly. Some species were too afraid. Some had tried to resist before and had been crushed, but others were interested. Others were ready. Others had been waiting for someone to show that resistance was possible. The first group to commit to helping Earth was the Collective. They sent engineers and weapons specialists to help design better defense systems. The Free Worlds Coalition sent retired military commanders who understood Council tactics. The Accord sent their best tactical computers. In the 3 weeks before the Council fleet arrived, Earth's defense system became something much more advanced. It became a collaborative effort. Humans worked alongside aliens from a dozen different species. They built new weapons. They created new strategies. They prepared a welcome for the Council fleet that the Council would never forget. Rachel worked with an engineer named who had been forced to work for the Council for 20 years. Understood Council ship systems better than almost anyone. Together, they designed weapons that could cut through Council shields. Worked with a tactical computer to create software that could predict Council military movements. The Council fleet was large, but it was also predictable. Council commanders always followed the same basic tactics. Once you understood the patterns, you could prepare for anything they did. General Grant, who had retired from Earth's military 15 years earlier, came back to lead the ground forces. He was old, but he was sharp, and he had studied Council military history more than anyone else alive. He knew how Council soldiers fought. He knew how they thought. He knew how to beat them. The day the Council fleet arrived, Earth was ready. The defense grid had been upgraded with alien technology. The military commanders understood Council tactics better than the Council commanders understood them themselves. The soldiers had trained with aliens and learned new ways of fighting. Earth was not the same world that the Council had tried to conquer 3 weeks earlier. When the Council ships began their attack, they found themselves facing something they had not expected. The defense systems were faster. The tactics were better. The coordination was perfect. Ship after ship was damaged or destroyed. The Council commanders could not understand what was happening. They had prepared for resistance, but not for this. Not for a unified defense that seemed to know their every move before they made it. By the time the Council fleet retreated, they had lost 30 ships. The survivors limped back toward Council space, carrying news of a disaster that the Council had not thought was possible. In the command center, David watched the last Council ship disappear from Earth's sensors. He did not feel victorious. He felt scared, because he knew that the Council would not give up now. The Council had been defeated twice. They would not accept a third defeat. They would bring everything they had to destroy Earth. But David also knew something else. Earth was no longer alone. They had allies now. They had friends among the stars, and the next time the Council came, Earth would be ready. The Galactic Council was breaking apart from the inside. The defeated Earth had shaken the Council's authority in ways that the Council leaders did not fully understand. Species that had accepted Council rule for thousands of years were now asking questions. If primitive Earth could destroy Council ships, could other species also resist? If the Council's military was not invincible, what was the point of Council protection? In the 6 weeks that followed the second battle, something changed across the galaxy. The news of Earth's victory spread to every corner of known space. Billions of beings watched the battle footage and came to the same conclusion. The Galactic Council was not invincible. The Council called an emergency session. Commander Vex was furious. His military reputation was destroyed. He had promised that the Second Fleet would crush Earth. Instead, the Second Fleet had been devastated. "We will send the entire military," Vex declared. "We will gather every ship we have. We will not send 50 ships or 500 ships. We will send 5,000 ships if that is what is necessary to destroy this world. Earth will be obliterated. Every city will burn. Every human will be dead. The galaxy will learn what happens when you resist the Galactic Council." But even as Vex was making these threats, something was happening that he did not notice. The other Council members were no longer listening to him with respect. They were listening with doubt. The old certainty had cracked. Ambassador Lyra, who had come to Earth with such confidence, proposed something different. "Perhaps we should negotiate with Earth. Perhaps we can reach an understanding." The Council chamber erupted in argument. Some leaders agreed with Lyra, others supported Vex. The Galactic Council, which had operated as a unified force for thousands of years, was fracturing. On Earth, David received the news through his intelligence network. The Galactic Council was divided. This was the opportunity Earth had been waiting for, but David knew that the Council would still send a massive force to destroy Earth. The question was whether Earth could survive that force long enough for the Council to tear itself apart from the inside. He called together the Alliance leaders. James Turner met with representatives from the Collective, the Free Worlds Coalition, and the Accord. These species had risked everything to help Earth. Now they would need to risk even more. "The Council is preparing a massive military force," David said. "But the Council itself is unstable. If we can show the galaxy that we can defend ourselves against their full military power, it will break the Council apart. Other species will rise up. The Council will fall." The engineer nodded slowly. You are asking us to stand with you against the full might of the Galactic Council. That is a suicidal request. It is, David admitted. But the alternative is that the Council crushes all of us eventually. Either we fight together now, or we die separately later. The species of the Alliance made their decision. They would stand with Earth. They would help defend against the Council's final attack. They would fight for their freedom. In the following weeks, Earth became something like a fortress. Alien ships came to orbit the planet. Weapons systems from 5 different species were integrated into a unified defense network. Soldiers from multiple worlds trained together. Humans fought alongside warriors and combat specialists. They learned from each other. They became stronger together. Doctor worked with scientists from 3 different species to create weapons systems that no Council military planner had ever seen before. They brought computing power that made the defense grid nearly unbeatable. They brought weapons technology that could pierce any shield. Humans brought creativity and the ability to think in ways that the Council had stopped thinking centuries ago. General Grant prepared the military strategy. He knew that the Council would come with overwhelming force, but he also knew that overwhelming force, if predictable, could be defeated. The Council always used the same basic tactics. They always sent their heaviest units first. They always tried to establish orbital dominance before attacking ground targets. "We will let them think they are winning," told his commanders. "We will retreat from the first assault. We will lose some positions. The Council will think that their massive force is finally overwhelming us, and then we will strike at them from directions they will not expect." The day the Council fleet arrived was the darkest day in Earth's history. The sky was filled with Council ships, thousands of them. The number was so large that they blocked out the sun in many parts of the planet. The Council transmitted a final message to Earth. "Your resistance ends now. You will surrender all weapons and all leadership within the hour. If you do not comply, every human will be killed. We will sterilize your planet and seed it with a new species that knows how to accept Council authority." David did not even respond. He simply gave the order, "Begin protocol victory." The battle that followed was not like the previous battles. This one was not a naval engagement between ships in space. This one was a total war. The Council attacked from space with weapons that could destroy mountains. Earth fought back with a defense system that had been built by 5 different species, each bringing their own knowledge and technology. The first wave of Council ships was torn apart by the unified defense grid. The second wave tried a different approach, attacking from multiple directions at once. The defense system adapted and destroyed them too. The Council had never faced opposition like this. They had never faced a unified enemy that understood their tactics better than they understood them. On the ground, when Council soldiers landed, they found themselves fighting humans who had trained with alien warriors. The humans were smaller and weaker than Council soldiers from most species, but they were faster. They were smarter. They adapted to every strategy the Council used, and they never gave up. The third day of the battle, something remarkable happened. Species that had been neutral, watching from a distance, began to move. The Dominion, which controlled the Eastern Galactic sector, announced that they were withdrawing from the Galactic Council. The Saurus Collective did the same. Then the Merchant Federation announced their departure. One by one, species began to leave the Council. The Council's authority was breaking apart in real time. The military could not fight Earth and also maintain control over the Council member species that were starting to rebel. By the 5th day of the battle, the Council fleet began to retreat. The ships that were still functional started leaving Earth's space. The Council's invasion had failed. Not only failed, but failed so completely that the Council's entire structure was collapsing. David stood in the command center and watched the last Council ships disappear into space. His hands were shaking. Earth had done the impossible. Earth had not just defeated the Galactic Council. Earth had broken the Galactic Council into pieces. The Galactic Council, which had ruled for 3,000 years, was dying. The institution that had seemed eternal was collapsing like a building with a broken foundation. The Council chamber, once a place of absolute authority, had become a place of chaos and confusion. Half of the Council member species had already left. The remaining members were arguing about what to do. Some wanted to continue the war against Earth. Others wanted to negotiate. Some wanted to disband the Council completely. There was no unity anymore. There was only fear and confusion. Commander Vex tried to hold the military together, but even his authority was falling apart. Military commanders from species that were leaving the Council were defecting. Ships were being recalled to protect home worlds instead of serving the Council. The military force that had been invincible was becoming fragmented. David sent Ambassador James Turner to the Council chambers to make an offer. It was not a demand. It was not a threat. It was a simple proposal for a new way of doing things. Earth does not wish to destroy the Galactic Council, James said to the remaining Council leaders. But we also will not accept Council rule over our world. We propose a new structure, a council of equals instead of a council of rulers. Every species gets a voice, regardless of military power. Decisions are made through agreement, not through force. The Council leaders listened to this proposal with mixed feelings. Many of them had gained power through the Council system. They had benefited from the Council's ability to crush opposition. But they also saw that the old system was destroying itself. The Council had ruled through the threat of military force. But now that threat was broken. The Council had no power left except through cooperation. If we accept this proposal, said Ambassador Lyra, what happens to the species that leave the Council? What happens to those who reject your new system? They remain free, James said simply. Freedom is not a punishment, it is a gift. Those who wish to trade with us can trade. Those who wish to be at peace with us can be at peace. Those who wish to join a new council based on equality can join, but no one will be forced. No one will be conquered. The debate in the council chamber lasted for days. Military leaders argued with political leaders. Species that had profited from council dominance argued against those who had suffered under it. Slowly, agreement began to form. The council would be reformed. The military would be downsized. Decisions would be made by consensus rather than by dominance. Power would be shared among equal members. It was a revolutionary idea for the Galactic Council, but it was also the only way to save the institution. Earth was invited to join the reformed council as an equal member. A human would sit in the council chambers with representatives from every other species. Humanity would have the same vote as any other species, regardless of their military power. This was something that seemed impossible just weeks before. Now it was becoming reality. But not everyone was happy with this development. Commander Vex, whose entire power structure was being dismantled, refused to accept the new council structure. He gathered what remained of his loyal military forces and declared independence from the council. The council is betraying its own foundation, Vex announced to his troops. I will not accept rule by equals. I will not accept that primitive humans have the same authority as council species. I will fight for the old order. Vex took his forces and established himself as an independent power, claiming several council worlds as his own. He represented a threat, but not the kind of threat he had once represented. He no longer had the unified military structure behind him. He was a lone warlord with some ships and soldiers, not a supreme commander with the power of the entire galaxy. The reformed council, now with Earth as a full member, decided to address this threat together. For the first time in its history, a council military force was being sent not to conquer or rule, but to maintain peace between equals. David argued for restraint. We do not need to destroy Vex. We need to contain him. Let him control a small territory. Let him see that the new system works. Eventually, his followers will leave him and he will become irrelevant. The council agreed. A combined military force made up of ships and soldiers from a dozen different species was sent to constrain Vex's territory. Vex fought against them, but his forces were no match for a coalition of allied species. Within a month, Vex was contained in a small region of space with only a handful of worlds. On Earth, the change was being felt in every city and every nation. Humans were no longer a primitive world waiting to be conquered. They were a space-faring species that had a voice in galactic affairs. Trade routes opened up. Technology flowed in from other species. Earth began to grow in ways that had been impossible before. Doctor was invited to join the Council's Scientific Forum, a body dedicated to advancing knowledge for all species. The who had suffered under Council rule were being restored to their former position as the galaxy's greatest engineers. The Accord, which had been slowly crushed by Council pressure, was expanding again. There were still problems. There were still species that did not trust the new system. There were pirates and warlords who profited from the old chaos of the galaxy. There were ancient enemies who started wars as the Council's grip weakened. But these were different kinds of problems. They were problems that could be solved through cooperation rather than domination. General Grant retired from military service, his work complete. The war for Earth's freedom was over, but he knew that peace was not guaranteed. The galaxy was a vast and dangerous place. Other threats would come. But now Earth would face those threats not alone but with allies, and that made all the difference. At a ceremony in the council chambers, David stood before the representatives of 500 species and delivered a simple message. We have learned that no species is inferior. We have learned that strength comes not from dominance, but from cooperation. We have learned that the future belongs not to those who conquer, but to those who work together. This is the lesson Earth brings to the galaxy. This is the gift humanity gives to the universe. The representatives applauded. It was a moment of hope. It was a moment when the galaxy seemed to be moving toward something better. But David knew that this moment was fragile. The work of building a real peace had only just begun. 5 years had passed since Earth stood alone against the Galactic Council. 5 years since humanity had proven that a primitive world could defeat a galactic empire. The galaxy had changed in those 5 years in ways that no one could have predicted. The reformed Galactic Council, now called the Galactic Federation, had grown stronger. Species that had lived in fear of council dominance now participated in decision-making. Trade flowed more freely. Scientific knowledge was shared between species rather than hoarded by the most powerful. The universe was becoming a better place, and it was happening because one world had been brave enough to say no. Earth had transformed from a backwater planet into a respected member of the galactic community. Human scientists were working in research centers across the galaxy. Human diplomats were solving disputes between species. Human soldiers were helping to maintain peace in regions where chaos had once ruled, and it had all started because Earth had refused to surrender. David now held the position of Senior Galactic Coordinator, making him one of the most important leaders in the galaxy. He had the responsibility of representing Earth's interests, and also of working to resolve conflicts before they became wars. It was a position he had never wanted, but it was a position he took seriously. On the anniversary of Earth's first victory, David returned to his home world. He stood in the same observation tower where he had watched the first Galactic Council ships arrive 5 years ago. The sky was clear and blue. No massive shadow fell across the land. Peace had come to Earth, and with it had come a future that had seemed impossible just years before. Rachel, now Admiral, was retired from active military service. She was teaching at Earth's military academy, training the next generation of soldiers who would represent humanity among the stars. Her students came from every continent and from every nation on Earth. They were learning not just how to fight, but how to work with aliens from 100 different species. Doctor had become the chief scientific advisor to the Galactic Federation. His work with alien scientists had resulted in technologies that were changing how the galaxy worked. Clean energy systems were powering worlds. Medical treatments developed through combined research were saving millions of lives. Transportation networks that connected species across light years were being built. Science, which had been used for domination under the old council, was now being used to improve the lives of billions. General Grant had lived to see the galaxy transform. At 93 years old, he was writing the official history of Earth's resistance to the Galactic Council. He was making sure that future generations would understand what had been possible when people refused to accept domination. He was making sure that the lesson would never be forgotten. But not everything was perfect. The galaxy was still dangerous. Pirate fleets still attacked trade routes. Some species still refused to accept the new Federation. And in the outer regions of known space, new threats were beginning to emerge. Threats that would require the united strength of the entire galactic community to face. Ambassador James Turner brought this news to David. We have received reports from the outer reaches. There is something out there, something that is attacking Federation worlds and taking their people. We do not know what it is yet, but it is powerful and it is moving deeper into known space. David listened to these words with the understanding that comes from experience. The galaxy was not done changing. The struggles were not finished. But this time, when new challenges came, Earth would not face them alone. And the galaxy would not face them under the rule of a single power. They would face them together as equals, as partners. On Earth, in cities across every continent, humans looked up at the night sky with hope. The stars were no longer mysterious and threatening. The universe was no longer a place of danger and fear. It was a place of opportunity and possibility. Humans had proven their worth not through conquest, but through courage and cleverness and the refusal to accept domination. The collective was rebuilding their great engineering centers. The Accord was expanding into new territories with the support of the Federation. The Free Worlds Coalition had grown to include over 50 independent species. The old order of domination had been replaced by a new order of cooperation. In the council chambers, now rebuilt as a place of equal representation rather than dominance, representatives from 600 species made decisions together. They argued sometimes. They disagreed often, but they did it through discussion rather than force. They did it through compromise rather than conquest. It was not perfect, but it was better than what had come before. David thought about the message he had delivered 5 years ago in the council chambers, about the lesson that no species was inferior and that strength came from cooperation. That message had spread through the galaxy. It had inspired species to rise up against oppressive systems. It had shown that change was possible. It had shown that a small world filled with ordinary people could change the entire galaxy. On his last day as Senior Galactic Coordinator, David attended a ceremony in the council chambers. Representatives from every major species in the galaxy came to honor his service. They gave him awards and titles and recognition. But what meant the most to him was a simple gift from the children of the Free Worlds Coalition and 100 other species. They had created a statue. It showed 5 different beings standing together, representing 5 different species, standing as equals. "This is what you gave us," the representative said. "Not just victory, not just freedom, but the understanding that we are stronger together than we could ever be alone." David accepted the gift with quiet pride. He thought of the soldiers who had died fighting for Earth's freedom. He thought of the scientists and engineers who had worked against impossible odds. He thought of the diplomats who had risked everything to build alliances. He thought of all the people, human and alien, who had believed that a better galaxy was possible and had worked to make that belief real. As he stood in the council chambers, surrounded by representatives of the species that had once seemed impossibly powerful, David realized something important. The real victory had not come from weapons or tactics or clever strategy. The real victory had come from people who refused to accept that their way of life had to be controlled by others. The real victory had come from people who believed that a better future was possible and worked to create it. The galaxy was still dangerous. New challenges would come, but humanity had proven something that could never be taken away. They had proven that courage, determination, and the willingness to stand together could overcome any obstacle, and that lesson would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. As the sun set over the Pacific Ocean on Earth, people looked up at the stars and knew that humanity had claimed its rightful place among them. Not as conquerors or slaves, but as equals. As partners in the great journey of building a better universe. And that was a victory more valuable than any military conquest could ever be.